I had been sitting at the Rusty Anchor, my favorite neighborhood bar in Charleston, South Carolina, for about 30 minutes. The cocktail waitress had just plunked down my second pint of craft beer and taken away the empty glass. I was here because I needed to think. Something at home didn't feel right, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Everyone knows that serious contemplation is best done with a drink in hand. My wife, Rachel, had been acting differently over the past few months. Every time I tried to talk to her about it, asking if something was wrong, she brushed me off. Our intimacy had also taken a sharp nosedive. Rachel had started to complain more and more about our finances, which didn't make much sense. I earned a six-figure salary as a senior software developer at a top firm, and with her income as a real estate agent, we were doing well, very well, in fact. We lived in a beautiful home, drove nice cars, and enjoyed occasional splurges on vacations and fine dining. With our investments and assets, we were worth close to $6 million, yet Rachel was acting as if we were teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. It didn't add up. Maybe it was ironic that she hadn't complained about the luxury spa membership I'd gifted her for her birthday 6 months ago. Or the fact that I'd recently paid off her car, a sleek Lexus she'd been pining after for years. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Yeah, I know what you're probably thinking. I was thinking the same thing. The most logical explanation was that she was having an affair. Maybe she was looking to trade up. There were two major problems with that theory. First, Rachel and I had been married for over 15 years, and we didn't have a prenup. If she left me, the divorce would financially wreck me. Second, I didn't have any hard evidence. Sure, the signs were there, but suspicion wasn't enough. Anyway, I had just taken the first sip of my second beer when I saw her walk into the bar. No, it wasn't Rachel. She was supposed to be out with her girlfriends tonight. This woman was someone I'd never seen before, and wow, she was stunning. She was tall, with flowing dark hair, piercing green eyes, and a confident stride that made every head in the room turn. She scanned the room quickly, then locked eyes with me and walked straight toward my booth. "Michael Carter?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from me without waiting for an invitation. I froze for a second before nodding. The waitress appeared almost immediately to take her order, a glass of white wine. The woman smiled politely before turning her full attention back to me. "My name is Julia Parker. I have some information you'll want to hear, and I also have a proposition for you." Her tone was calm and measured, but her words carried weight. "Information?" I asked, trying to sound casual despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "What's this going to cost me?" Julia smiled faintly. "Nothing. In fact, if you take me up on my proposal, it could save you a fortune and most of your assets." I leaned back in my seat, studying her. This wasn't the type of thing that happened to me. My life, up until recently, had been predictable, maybe even boring. But now, I was sitting across from a stranger who claimed to have life-changing information. "All right," I said, folding my arms. "I'm listening." Julia wasted no time. "Your wife is cheating on you," she said bluntly. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to stay calm. "And how do you know that? Do you have proof?" She leaned forward slightly, her green eyes unwavering. "I know because she's cheating on you with my brother. I have photos, videos, audio recordings, and notarized statements. I can give all of that to you." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The noise of the bar seemed to fade into the background. "Wow," I finally managed. "You must really hate your brother to throw him under the bus like this." Her grin lit up the room. "Quite the opposite, actually. I'm here on his behalf." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry, what?" "Brad sent me," she said. "He wanted me to talk to you before you found out another way. He's not proud of the situation, but he wants to make it right." He also knows Rachel is only with him because she thinks he's richer than you. And she's right, he is. But there's more to this. I frowned, trying to piece together what she was saying. So let me get this straight. Your brother is sleeping with my wife, and instead of hiding it, he sends you to help me? Why? What does he gain from this? Julia leaned back and crossed her legs, her confidence unshaken. It's simple. Brad despises cheaters. When he got involved with Rachel, he had no idea she was married. She told him you were separated and heading for divorce. 2 weeks ago, a background check revealed the truth, and he was furious. But instead of dumping her outright, he decided to teach her a lesson she wouldn't forget. This was a lot to process. Okay, and how do I fit into this little revenge plan of his? Julia's smile widened slightly. Here's the deal. Brad wants her to think she's getting everything she's ever wanted, him, his money, a new life. He'll string her along just long enough to convince her to divorce you. And when she does, he'll make sure she files on terms that leave you with almost everything. I raised an eyebrow. You expect me to believe that your brother, the guy who's sleeping with my wife, suddenly grew a conscience and wants to help me? Forgive me if I'm skeptical. Julia laughed softly. I get it. But there's more. Brad was married once before. His ex-wife was a gold digger who cheated on him, and thanks to a brutal prenup, she walked away with nothing. He learned his lesson. He's not interested in marrying someone like Rachel. In fact, as soon as the ink is dry on your divorce, he plans to dump her. I stared at her, still not sure if this was some elaborate scam or the real deal. All right, I said slowly. Let's assume I believe you. What's your role in all of this? Julia's expression softened. I'm here to give you the tools you need to protect yourself. The photos, the videos, the recordings, I'll hand it all over to you. Use it to move assets, prepare your case, and make sure Rachel gets as little as possible. Just don't confront her yet. Let Brad handle that part. I took a deep breath, trying to wrap my head around everything. So, let me get this straight. You want me to sit back, let your brother seduce my wife into divorcing me, and trust that you'll make sure I come out ahead? Julia nodded. Exactly. I know it sounds insane, but trust me, this is the best way to protect yourself. If you confront Rachel now, she'll fight tooth and nail for every penny. But if you let us guide her, she'll think she's winning. And when it's all said and done, you'll walk away with almost everything. It sounded too good to be true, but at the same time, it made a twisted kind of sense. And what does Brad get out of this? Julia's smile faltered for the first time. Closure. Revenge. Call it what you want. He hates being lied to, and he hates people like Rachel who use others for their own gain. This is his way of making sure she pays for what she's done. I leaned back in my seat, running a hand through my hair. I'll need proof, everything you said you have. And I'll need time to think this over. This isn't something I can jump into blindly. Fair enough, Julia said. I'll have everything delivered to you by tomorrow. And if you want to meet Brad, I can arrange that too. He's not your enemy, Michael. He actually respects you. You've been dealt a raw deal, and he wants to help you come out on top. I didn't know what to say to that. This woman had walked into my life out of nowhere and flipped everything upside down. But as crazy as her story sounded, part of me wanted to believe her. She finished her wine, stood up, and looked down at me with a smirk. You're a good man, Michael Carter. I think you'll find that Brad and I are on your side. Take care, and remember, don't do anything rash. And with that, she was gone, leaving me alone in the booth with my half-empty beer and 1,000 questions swirling in my head. The next morning, a manila envelope was waiting for me at the front door. Inside were photos, screenshots of text conversations, and even audio clips of Rachel's voice. It was damning evidence, and as much as I wanted to storm into the house and confront her, I knew I had to play it smart. That evening, Rachel came home late, as usual. She gave me a half-hearted excuse about traffic and meetings running over. I forced myself to smile, pretending everything was fine, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Julia's words echoed in my mind, "Don't let her know you're suspicious." Over the next 2 weeks, I met with Julia and Brad several times. Brad was everything Julia had described: charismatic, sharp, and deeply resentful of people who used others. We discussed the plan in detail, and I began making quiet moves to secure my assets. I transferred half of the money from our joint checking account into a new account under my name. I adjusted the titles on our investment properties, making sure they were locked down. And I started cataloging every piece of evidence Julia had given me, organizing it into a file that my lawyer could use if things went south. But the most surprising development wasn't the financial preparations or the meetings with Brad. It was my growing connection with Julia. She was smart, funny, and incredibly kind, a stark contrast to the cold, distant woman Rachel had become. Julia wasn't just helping me navigate the nightmare of Rachel's betrayal, she was reminding me what it felt like to trust someone again. One night, after dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant, I decided to address the elephant in the room. "Julia, I need to be honest with you. I'm starting to feel something for you, but I'm still married. I can't let myself cross that line, no matter how broken my marriage is." She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she smiled. "I admire that about you, Michael. You're not like Rachel. You have integrity, and that's why I'm falling for you too. But you're right, we can't start something until your divorce is final. So, let's wait. And when the time comes, I'll be ready." The following weeks were a whirlwind of secrecy and quiet planning. Rachel continued her routine of late nights and work obligations, while I played the part of the clueless husband. Julia kept me updated on Brad and Rachel's relationship. Apparently, Rachel was growing more enamored with Brad by the day. She believed he was her ticket to a wealthier, more glamorous life. She started hinting at divorce during our few conversations, testing the waters to see how I'd react. Each time, I played dumb, brushing it off as stress or a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Brad was playing his part perfectly. He encouraged Rachel to make the first move, convincing her that she needed to cut ties with me if they were ever going to have a future together. She fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Then, one evening, the moment I'd been waiting for arrived. Rachel came home earlier than usual, her expression unusually serious. I was sitting in the living room, pretending to read a book, when she walked in. "Michael, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight. I set the book down and looked at her, feigning concern. "What's wrong?" She sat down across from me, smoothing her skirt nervously. "This isn't easy to say, but I think we've grown apart. Our marriage isn't what it used to be, and I think it's time we go our separate ways." I stared at her, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably before speaking. "I see. And is there someone else?" Rachel's face turned red. "No. Of course not. I've been unhappy for a while, and I think this is the best decision for both of us." I leaned back, nodding slowly. "All right. If that's how you feel, I won't fight you on it. But I hope we can handle this amicably." Her relief was palpable. She quickly pulled out a manila envelope, "Divorce papers. I've already spoken to a lawyer, and I made sure everything is fair. You'll keep the house and your retirement accounts. I just want my share of the savings and my car." I skimmed the papers briefly, pretending to consider them. "This seems reasonable. But I'll need my lawyer to review it first." Rachel smiled, clearly pleased that I wasn't putting up a fight. "Of course. take your time. What she didn't know was that I already had a plan in motion. Julia, Brad, and I had prepared for this exact moment. Over the next week, my lawyer and I worked to finalize the revised divorce agreement. Rachel remained oblivious, thinking everything was proceeding smoothly. What she didn't know was that the agreement left her with far less than she'd initially assumed. Thanks to Julia and Brad's guidance, I had moved assets, restructured investments, and safeguarded my financial future. The day we met to sign the final agreement, Rachel walked into the lawyer's office with a smug smile. Brad had even accompanied her, playing the doting boyfriend to perfection. I couldn't help but admire how well he played his role. As the papers were notarized and signed, Rachel's lawyer looked uneasy. "Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed with these terms, Mrs. Carter? I must advise you that they're heavily skewed in Mr. Carter's favor." Rachel waved him off. "It's fine. I won't need anything from Michael after the divorce. Brad and I have a future together." I fought the urge to smirk. She had no idea what was coming. 2 weeks later, I received the final divorce decree. I was officially free. The house, the bulk of our savings, and all significant assets were mine. Rachel, on the other hand, was left with her car, her clothes, and a small checking account. The night after the divorce was finalized, Julia and I attended a formal gala Brad was hosting at his mansion. It was a grand affair, filled with Charleston's elite. Rachel was there too, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her. Midway through the evening, Brad took the stage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. I'd like to take a moment to introduce someone very special to me, my sister, Julia Parker." The crowd clapped as Julia joined him on stage. Then Brad turned to Rachel, who was seated in the front row, her expression glowing with expectation. "Rachel, I've been thinking a lot about us and our future. There's something I need to say." He paused dramatically, then smiled. "I can't be with someone I don't trust." Rachel's face fell. What are you talking about?" she stammered. Brad's tone turned icy. "You lied to me from the very beginning. You claimed to be separated when you were very much married. You manipulated me, just as you tried to manipulate your husband. I despise liars and cheaters, Rachel. We're done." Gasps rippled through the room. Rachel's face turned pale, then beet red. She stammered, but Brad had already turned his back on her, walking away. Rachel tried to salvage her life, but word spread quickly among Charleston's high society. She was labeled a manipulator and a gold digger, and no one wanted anything to do with her. Her new reality? A small apartment, a low-paying job, and a life far removed from the luxury she once enjoyed. As for me, Julia and I took things slow. 6 months after the divorce, I proposed to her during a quiet evening at the beach. She said yes, and we celebrated the beginning of a new chapter. I couldn't have scripted a better ending. Rachel got exactly what she deserved, and I got a fresh start with someone who truly valued me.